Part 56. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 551. Before Xiaoping arrived at the cemetery near the catacombs in the 14th arrondissement in southern Paris, the agile god of fortune boy had already arrived near the Château de Boulogne in the west of Paris in a flash of his body. Surrounding the Château de Boulogne is the lush forest of Boulogne. Just next to the Château Boulogne is the Seine River, and several docks and piers can be seen nearby. The Bois de Boulogne has beautiful scenery. You can see tree-lined avenues and lakes everywhere, and it is quiet. With water birds inhabiting it, you can also see hares and deer emerging from the forest park from time to time. It's just that this huge area is extremely quiet even during the day, with almost no outsiders disturbing it. In Paris, where food is in short supply, no one seems to think of coming here to hunt some animals or find some wild vegetables. Just at the entrance to the forest, there is a warning sign. There are scary warnings written in several languages on the sign. There is a skull sign on the sign. Below the sign is a line: you are about to enter the sphere of influence of the French Summoners Alliance. Rashly break in and you might get shot. In addition to these scary warning signs, on the outskirts of the Bois de Boulogne, armed men with guns can also be seen patrolling around in twos and threes. This posture can already make ordinary people stay away and not dare to enter rashly. The lucky boy who came here was particularly naughty and happy. After wandering around several armed patrols, the lucky boy, who found nothing unusual, rode on a deer in the forest. The deer ran and passed through half of the cloth. Lo nigh forest. Then the god of fortune boy grabbed the foot of an egret, and the egret took him to fly in a small circle over the forest. When the boy, the god of fortune, released his grip on the egret's feet and fell from the sky, he was already standing inside the Château de Boulogne. Mr. Curie said that Château Boulogne is the headquarters of the French League of Summoners. Logically speaking, it should be very lively with many summoners. But when the lucky boy came here, he found that Château Boulogne was extremely deserted, except for there were several armed men with guns patrolling the gates and walls of Fort Boulogne. The entire castle seemed empty, with almost no one in sight. Not only was the castle empty, even the basement and dungeon of the castle were as clean as if a dog had licked them, with not a single hair in sight. As for the Baguette Monuli, the god of fortune walked around the entire castle without seeing any of them. Only in an obviously luxurious office, the boy of fortune saw a few photos and a few pictures of the Baguette Monuli. Trophies and stuff like that. Some of the gorgeous bedrooms in the castle were deserted and the doors were locked. It didn't look like anyone lived here at all. There are also some secret training rooms, attics, secret passages, etc. in the castle. After the search by the god of fortune, they were all revealed, but nothing of value was found. There is a very secret underground secret passage in the Château de Boulogne. After the lucky boy entered the underground secret passage a few hundred meters, the secret passage connected to an ancient underground tunnel, which was filled with dusty tunnel spider silk, and on both sides of the tunnel, there are white bones wearing armor. They look full of vicissitudes of life, at least hundreds of miles in history. The god of fortune boy walked into the tunnel again and saw coffins one after another. The bones in the coffins and the clothes on the bones were all rotten. The deeper you go into the tunnel, the more and more rotten corpses there are. On both sides of the tunnel, there are bone walls built with human skulls. This place is like a world of the undead and skeletons. When ordinary people come here, they may not be able to survive. It takes seconds to suffocate. Further forward, in the tunnel filled with bones, there began to be more and more forked roads, and some places had even collapsed. Even with the ability of the lucky boy, he could not navigate the maze-like long tunnel for a while. Come over. Very strange. Apart from some minions guarding the castle of Boulogne, there is no summoner. This situation is a bit abnormal. The entire Château de Boulogne exudes an indescribable strangeness. The tunnel connected to the secret passage under the Château de Boulogne, filled with the bones of the dead, should be part of the ancient Paris catacombs. If Bourget Monouilly is a member of the Devil's Eye, and those nuclear materials were indeed transported to Chateau Boulogne, and there is a tunnel leading to the Paris catacombs in Boulogne, then what exactly does the Devil's Eye want to do? Xiaopinghan felt that he had grasped something vaguely, and the answer seemed to be ready to come out. Xiaopinghan's heart beat violently several times. In the car, Xiaopinghan frowned slightly and looked at Mr. Curie. "Mr. Curie, when was the last time you met Bourget Monouilly?" "Well, since the government evacuated from Paris, Bourget Monouilly has rarely been seen in public, but the last time we met was last week. The morning after we met in the restaurant, I went to the Chateau Boulogne in person. I visited him and asked him to help us find nuclear materials." Mr. Curie looked at Xiaopinghan curiously. "Why, is there any problem?" Xiaopinghan smiled slightly. "Nothing, I just asked." More than half an hour later, Xiaopinghan and Mr. Curie had arrived at the cemetery near the catacombs in the 14th arrondissement in the south of Paris. This cemetery is located on a small slope on the outskirts of the city. The slope is planted with pine trees and is surrounded by green trees. Standing on the slope where the cemetery is located, you can also see an entrance to the Paris catacombs not far away. 2 years ago, the Paris catacombs were still open to tourists as a tourist attraction. But now, although the entrance to the catacombs is still open, it is somewhat deserted and the door has been closed. No Parisian would think about it. Go take a look. In a place like the cemetery, even if you come here in broad daylight, you will feel a sense of gloom lingering here. However, compared to the underground catacombs not far away, the cemetery on the hillside can be considered sunny and the scenery is unique. Not many people probably know that the so-called romantic capital of Paris is built on a huge cemetery. The catacombs in Paris are a huge underground project. The length of the tomb passages in the catacombs is more than 320 kilometers. Within the tomb passages, where more than 6 million French skeletons are piled up. The plague hundreds of years ago turned the city of Paris into a huge cemetery. The whole city was full of buried corpses. In the end, the government had no choice but to dig underground graves to house the bones of the dead. The more they accumulated, the longer the tunnels were dug. Slowly, the underground tomb became a forbidden area for strangers. There were mountains of bones inside, piled up into walls, which made people shudder. Even when it was later opened as a tourist attraction, the open area, in fact, less than 1% of the entire catacombs. The popular front had people guarding the cemetery. With the arrival of Mr. Curie, the people guarding here quickly took the two of them to several graves with traces of excavation. Wearing masks, they opened the coffins in the pits. As soon as the coffin was opened, the pungent corpse odor rushed straight out. The smell made Mr. Li couldn't help covering his mouth and nose with a handkerchief, took 2 steps back, and quickly avoided it. Only Xiaopinghan, with a calm expression on his face, still stood beside the coffin, squinting his eyes and staring at the situation in the tomb. As long as he was a summoner who had seen the Devil's Eye sacrifice, he could master the summoning of the Requiem banner. Teachers will no longer feel that there are horrible corpses in the world. The corpse in the coffin has been highly decomposed, but from the decomposed corpse, you can still see some signs of death by radiation. The hair of the corpse has completely fallen off, and part of the skin has also fallen off. This situation occurs before the death of the corpse. There is no way to fake it on a corpse. At Mr. Curie's signal, a person from the People's Front wearing anti-epidemic clothing jumped into the grave pit with a radiation monitoring instrument, and in front of Xiaopinghan, used the radiation monitoring instrument to approach the corpse for monitoring. Biddy, beep, beep. The reading on the detector suddenly surged, and the detector started to alarm. Therefore, there is no doubt that the people in the tomb died after suffering severe radiation. Even the corpses still have excessive levels of radiation. The corpses in the nearby grave pits are all the same. They have the characteristics of radiation death. Do they need to be tested again? Mr. Curie asked next to him. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 552. Xiaopingyan was about to speak, but suddenly, his heart moved. He turned his head and looked at the entrance of the underground tomb not far away. His eyes suddenly became sharp. At that moment, Xiaopingyan had a vague feeling. In the direction of the underground tomb, there seemed to be a weak fluctuation of divine power, but the feeling disappeared in the blink of an eye. The time that the divine power fluctuation came was very short, it was lost in an instant, and it was very weak and a little blurry. After Xiaopingyan waited for a few seconds, there was no more divine power fluctuation coming from the direction of the underground tomb. This made Xiaopingyan mutter in his heart, could it be that it was an illusion just now, or that what he felt was not the fluctuation of divine power, but the aura coming from the underground activities of space-invading creatures such as magic fire spiders. Space-invading creatures such as magic fire spiders sometimes have a vague aura similar to divine power fluctuations when they release their natural abilities. Especially across the ground, this aura is more obscure and difficult to distinguish. If it were an ordinary summoner, he would never feel the fluctuation at that moment. Even Chen Changming and the others would not be able to feel it. The more powerful the summoner, the more sensitive he will be to the fluctuations in the surrounding divine power. Ahem, Mr. Luoan. Finding that Xiaopingyan was slightly lost in thought while looking at the catacombs in the distance, Mr. Curie picked up his cane and coughed twice as a reminder. Oh, no need. Xiaopingyan turned his head and looked at Mr. Curie. It has been confirmed that the corpses here were caused by radiation. This clue is very useful to us. The rest will be left to us. Just as Xiaopingyan finished speaking, suddenly, a more powerful wave of divine power came from the direction of the underground tomb, causing Xiaopingyan's expression to change slightly. Just now, he doubted whether it was his illusion, but now, he suddenly confirmed that it was either an illusion or a fluctuation of divine power coming from the depths of the underground tomb. Although the distance was far away, there were still obstacles from the ground and the many tombs. But Xiaopingyan still felt it clearly. Not only did he feel it, the Requiem flag in his secret mandala sculpture suddenly glowed at this time, as if it was disturbed by some force. Ah! Came an exclamation from the side. The staff member of the People's Front who had just put on the protective clothing and held the radiation monitoring equipment had just brought the monitoring equipment out of the grave pit. He was about to climb up when he suddenly shouted in panic. He stood up and pointed at the rotting corpse in the open coffin with a trembling hand. Damn, hand, I just saw the hand of this corpse move. Just as the man was speaking, the hand of the rotting corpse in the coffin moved again. This time, the movement of the hand was a bit large. The corpse seemed to be electrocuted and convulsed, and its body and shoulders trembled violently. One time. It's moving again. The person next to him screamed. At this time, Mr. Curie also saw it, and his face changed slightly. Several people from the Popular Front turned pale and began to draw their guns. Hurry up and climb up. Xiaopingyan's expression changed, and as soon as he stretched out his hand, he grabbed the strong man who jumped into the grave and threw him to the ground. Protect Mr. Curie and leave here immediately. Xiaopingyan said directly to Mr. Curie's bodyguards with an extremely serious face. What happened? Mr. Curie also felt something was wrong and asked. I'm not sure, but it's definitely not a good thing. I just felt a very strong wave of divine power coming from the catacombs in Paris. After Xiaopingyan finished speaking, the rotting corpse in the coffin in the tomb suddenly sat up from the coffin, with its upper body upright. As the corpse sat up, the maggots and carrion on the corpse began to clatter. Fall down. Bang 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 bang. Mr. Curie's bodyguard already had a gun in his hand. When he saw the rotting corpse suddenly sitting up, he started shooting violently at the corpse. The bullets hit the corpse, black and white. Yellow corpse water and blood splashed everywhere, and the corpse of the rotting corpse was beaten into a sieve in the blink of an eye, with 7 or 8 bullets on its head. But even so, the corpse still struggled, stood up from the coffin, and opened its mouth. It made a weird roar and tried to crawl out of the grave. This scene is enough to scare the faint of heart. The horrifying scene stopped when a fireball landed on the rotting corpse and turned it into ashes. "Protect Mr. Curie and leave here immediately," Xiaopinggan urged again. This time, Mr. Curie's bodyguards and several people from the Popular Front did not dare to waste another half a second. They hurriedly protected Mr. Curie and hurriedly walked towards the outside of the cemetery in a panic. This is the embarrassment and panic that ordinary people feel under the summoner's spell. As everyone walked past the tombs, everyone could hear a dull banging sound coming from under the tombstones they passed, like someone using a hammer to hit the coffin in the ground. There were only a few sounds at first, but after just a few seconds, they became more and more numerous. It was like there were countless people beating drums underground in the entire cemetery, and there was a dull sound under each grave. The people who had been sleeping in the cemetery seemed to have collectively woken up and wanted to crawl out of the grave. Mr. Curie was old, and even if he walked quickly, he could not move faster. Just when everyone was a third of the way, the ground under a new grave in front was finally dug up, and a pale hand suddenly stretched out from below. Before they had gone far, a half-rotted corpse crawled out of the ground. The corpse's head fell to the ground, and its eyes and nose fell from its face like snot. Bang 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 bang. Da-da-da-da. The pistols and submachine guns of Mr. Curie's bodyguards all fired, causing the rotting corpse to tremble wildly and causing blood and flesh to fly. But suddenly, the corpse began to rapidly swell and turn red. Boom! The corpse exploded like a bomb, blowing up a big crater on the ground. The broken bones and flesh of the corpse were flying around like shrapnel, but the hundreds of broken bones were splashing at high speed. When it shot in front of everyone, it was blocked by a shimmering water curtain. Xiaopinggan stood in front of everyone like a mountain. At this moment, Xiaopinggan was extraordinarily calm, his face as calm as iron. He didn't even move. The water curtain rose in front of everyone, easily blocking the explosion of the corpse. At the same time, he waved his hand, and 7 or 8 fireballs flew out in succession, blasting the surroundings. A pile of rotting corpses that had just crawled out of the ground within 50 meters turned into ashes. These rotting corpses have been summoned and activated by the corpse explosion technique and the corpse sacrifice technique. Please do not get too close. If you see the corpses swelling, you must leave or lie down immediately. Do not let these corpses come closer than 5 meters. When Xiaopinggan protected Mr. Curie and his bodyguards and got into the car, demons were already dancing in the cemetery. Thousands of skeletons and corpses crawled out of the graves and were running around, some heading towards Xiaopinggan ran over to where they were. Fortunately, there are no residential areas near the cemetery, otherwise it would cause huge chaos and casualties just now. Hurry up! Xiaopinggan yelled at Mr. Curie's bodyguard after he put Mr. Curie in the car in person. Mr. Luowan, what about you? Mr. Curie turned pale and panted, but still maintained his proper demeanor. He turned around and asked, "Let's go together." Mr. Curie, this is the battlefield of summoners, mortals retreat. After Xiaopinggan finished speaking, he closed the car door with a bang. Mr. Curie's bodyguard stepped on the accelerator, and several cars quickly left the cemetery. As soon as Mr. Curie's car left, Xiaopinggan turned around and waved his hand, and he summoned 100 elite slave soldiers and 100 Wei soldiers. As soon as the elite slave soldiers were summoned, they dispersed. One by one, the elite slave soldiers took off the throwing spears from their backs and began to stab at the rotten corpses. In the blink of an eye, the rotten corpses fell down. Blockbusters. The Wei soldiers summoned by Xiaopinggan were like special forces in the cold weapon era. They were in groups of several, with shields, crossbows, and spears matching each other. They killed the rotting corpses before they got close. The area near the cemetery turned into a battlefield. The corpses of rotten corpses kept expanding and exploding, and the Wei soldiers and elite slave soldiers summoned by Xiaoping also kept disappearing in the battle. In this battle, the military subs driven by Tupolu and the others finally arrived. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 553. Dong 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 dong. Heavy machine gun bullets flew across the cemetery slope like a storm. The bullets broke branches and tombstones, splashing the lawn soil on the ground, leaving craters. Several half-rotted corpses that had just emerged from the cemetery were like straw under the sickle. Was cut off by the bullets of the heavy machine gun, the fragile bones of the rotting body broke into several pieces, and fell heavily to the ground. Half of Tupolu's body with a bare head was exposed from the sunroof on top of the SUV. He was holding the heavy machine gun mounted on the roof of the car. The heavy machine gun spit out fire snakes. Tupolu's whole body muscles were trembling with the heavy machine gun. He was also roaring, "Trash, bastards, go to hell." The person driving the SUV at the front was Fang Lingshan. Fang Lingshan stepped on the accelerator, her beautiful lips pursed tightly, and the SUV's engine roared like a steel monster rushing towards it, knocking over a dozen corpses blocking the road. Flying up, some even falling apart, the car rushed in directly from the interception of a group of carrion corpses. There were rotten corpses that expanded and exploded, but the broken bones from the explosion of the rotten corpses hit the SUV's thick 7-layer bulletproof glass and bulletproof armor, making a crackling sound like rain hitting banana trees, and at most they only left traces on the body of the car. A dent, or a shattered white mark on the glass. The most disgusting thing was that the various fragments of organs and mucus from the self-destruct corpses were all covered in the car. A piece of rotting intestines hit the window of the SUV driven by Fang Lingshan. The SUV continued to rush forward, knocking 2 more rotting corpses away, and finally hit a rotting corpse wearing a tattered dress and directly knocked the corpse away. The rotten corpse hit a big tree hard, causing the tree to shake. The rotten corpse was sandwiched between the car and the tree. It struggled in vain, and the car stopped and attacked. The 2 cars behind also stopped. The Dragon team came, and the Order Committee team also came. The people on both sides of the underground tunnel who had searched together quickly jumped out of the car. Tupolu had already taken out his broadsword. He roared angrily, the broadsword flew, and a layer of fire appeared on his sword. As soon as he got out of the car, Tupolu cut 2 carrion corpses rushing towards him into 2 pieces. The rotten corpse was slashed by Tupolu's sword and turned into dust. Fang Lingshan also jumped out of the car, raised the gun in her hand, and with a single shot, the 8 rotting corpses sandwiched between the front of the car and the tree trunk were reduced to dust, with only 8 bodies still banging on the hood. What Fang Lingshan shot was a rune bullet, which was a powerful weapon against things like rotting corpses. "Grandma, are these rotting corpses holding a conference here? Isn't it nice to be underground? Dust to dust, why bother? I'll go and escort you. Li Yunzhou teased by screamed, but his hands were unambiguous. He threw a few fireballs at once to reduce the rushing corpses to ashes. At the same time, he summoned 4 summoned soldiers holding shields to protect him. Imposed a water shield on himself to protect himself perfectly. When he saw Fang Lingshan's rune bullets, he shouted resentfully, "Lingshan, you don't care about me even if you have rune bullets." Fang Lingshan gave him a roll of her eyes, didn't bother to pay attention to this guy, and just continued to shoot. As for Fang Lingqian, he was very straightforward. As soon as he came out, he summoned dozens of slave soldiers and archers and rushed towards the corpses. Everyone in the dragon group was still the same as the last time they entered the underground. They had a clear division of labor and a tacit understanding of cooperation. As soon as they got out of the car, a large area of the surrounding corpses was cleared. A group of summoned soldiers and tigers pounced on the surrounding zombies. He passed by and quickly reversed the situation around him. Try to eliminate these zombies nearby, don't let them escape. Chen Changming waved his hand, and several fireballs flew out, killing the 3 zombies that rushed over, and quickly gave them to the dragon group. Several people issued orders: Lu Xiong, Yang Xiaodong, you 2 guard the intersection on the left. Chao Tong, Su Xiao, I will leave the slope on the right to you. The only threat these rotting corpses pose to the summoners is the corpse explosion, but even the corpse explosion, in front of the summoners' water shields, is just like the human fireworks seen through the window, without any threat. Xiaoping'an held the gun with both hands and fired his bow left and right. Amidst the banging gunfire, the 2 silver revolvers kept blooming with fire in his hands, shooting rune bullets one after another, turning the corpses into fireballs and ashes. Xiaoping'an found time to make these rune bullets a few days ago, but he didn't expect them to come in handy so quickly. Xiaoping'an, who was killing the rotting corpses with a pistol, seemed to have found the feeling he had in the order committee again. What's going on? Why did the corpse mutate here? The furious Tupolo killed several corpses and was the first one to rush over. Immediately afterwards, Chen Changming from the dragon team also rushed over. I have found key clues to those nuclear materials. There are several corpses in the cemetery here that died of radiation. They are people from the Doomsday Gang. People with devil eyes are hiding in the underground tombs. Let's deal with these rotting corpses first. Xiaoping'an gave a brief introduction, waved his hand, and 2 rows of cavalry were summoned. The sound of the cavalry's hooves was like thunder, and they rushed towards the carrion corpses that were running away. The Chinese cavalry galloped through the streets of Paris, with scimitars like snow and spears like dragons, which was particularly shocking. With the iron cavalry, those rotting corpses won't be able to run far. Seeing the arrival of Tupolu and the others, Xiaoping'an secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, he no longer had to reveal his strength. To Xiaoping'an, these rotting corpses were no better than cockroaches. The key was that there were too many. If they didn't come, to prevent these rotting corpses from causing greater chaos and damage, Xiaoping'an would have to summon more soldiers. For a summoner in the 7th element realm, that would be a bit dazzling and not low-key at all. This is much better now. After finishing the 70 or 80 rounds of rune bullets in his hand, Xiaoping'an put away the pistol neatly. With a move of his hand, Xiaoping'an took out a honeycomb rocket launcher more than 1 meter long and pointed it at the cemetery, and those rotting corpses blasted away. The rocket launcher in Xiaoping'an's hand is not an individual soldier's equipment, but a weapon mounted on helicopters, fighter jets and armored vehicles. Its power is incomparable to that of individual rocket launchers. Xiaoping'an is carrying such a big thing by himself. When it exploded, a series of rockets flew out from the big thing in his hand. In the violent explosion, the entire cemetery seemed to have been blown up by a bomber. In an instant, it was a sea of fire, the soil was overturned, and the shock wave of the explosion was scattered. After firing the rocket in his hand, Xiaoping'an moved his hand, took out another one, and continued to blast. Holy shit, how many things do you have? Li Yunzhou screamed. The battle continued, and the number of rotting corpses in the cemetery became less and less. After more than 10 minutes, when the last few rotting corpses were reduced to ashes in the flames of Tupolo's sword and the dragon team members, everything calmed down. The entire cemetery and the ground for thousands of meters around the cemetery have changed. There is no complete cemetery to be found in the cemetery. There are broken limbs and broken arms everywhere, broken bones and carrion are everywhere, and the stench is overwhelming. Chapter 2 will be updated tonight. Golden Summoner. Author, Zy Hu. Chapter 554. As Xiaoping'an waved his hand, the summoned elite slave soldiers, Wei soldiers, and storm cavalry all returned to him, and filed into the illusory door beside him, returning to the secret mandala. In this battle, 1/5 of the soldiers summoned by Xiaoping'an were lost. It was almost the most intense battle since he returned to Earth. Click. Tupole's stab-proof military boots stepped heavily on a skull on the ground. The skull that had been opening and closing its mouth just now turned into bone residue on the ground and finally stopped moving. Looking at the battlefield where the smoke had not dispersed, spitting on the ground like bullets, Tupolu finally put away his sword and walked towards Xiaoping'an. Damn it, Xiaoping'an is getting more and more perverted. He has this kind of rocket mounting module. I don't know how big this guy's space equipment is. Tupolu muttered in his heart, but he said, I think the French should pay us. Last time it was the demon rats and zombies in the tunnels of the underground city. This time it was the zombies again. We have already protected the city twice. Summoners returned to Xiaoping'an one by one. The warriors summoned by Xiaoping'an have been taken back, but the warriors summoned by others, which have not been fused with the Mingjin World Pearl, are still here. They either dissipate on their own initiative, or they can only wait for the time for the arrival of the plane to run out. Dissipates automatically. The god of fortune has returned. When Xiaoping'an was fighting just now, the boy of fortune entered the passage of the catacombs in Paris from the secret passage of Fort Boulogne. He walked around in it for a while and explored for more than 10 kilometers. Afterwards, it was discovered that there were some corpses in the passage of the underground tomb that seemed to have been dead for just a few months. Those corpses have rotted and were all shot to death. They are completely different from the vicissitudes of the skeletons in the tunnel. Judging from the clothes of those corpses, they are very similar to the militants of the French Summoners Alliance who are currently guarding Fort Boulogne. The tunnel the front was completely blown down, and the god of fortune boy could no longer search, so he returned to Xiaoping'an. Seeing everyone gathered, Xiaoping'an didn't talk nonsense and said directly to everyone, the gangsters from the Doomsday Gang who were buried here after they died from severe radiation told the doctors who treated them during their lifetime that they had sent a group of people went to the castle of Boulogne, and then their bodies developed severe radiation symptoms. They were later controlled by the Doomsday Gang, otherwise they would see a doctor, and then they disappeared. The castle of Boulogne is now almost an empty castle. None of the summoners from the French Summoners Alliance are in the castle. At the same time, the underground secret passage of Boulogne Castle is connected to the catacomb passage in Paris. A section of the passage has been destroyed by bombing. There are some militants from the French Summoners Alliance. He died in the tomb tunnel, and it looked like he had been silenced. In just a few words, Xiaoping'an had already explained all the key information points. No one asked how Xiaoping'an knew it, because it was not important to the summoner's letter. What was important was the truth or falsehood of the information Xiaoping'an said. The background of Fort Boulogne is very clear to everyone who has performed missions in Paris and done mission background intelligence analysis. Sure enough, when he heard this, Fang Linqian's eyes suddenly became sharp. Barget Mornule. If the people who died in the underground tunnels of Chateau Boulogne could also detect excessive radiation, then it can be completely certain that the nuclear materials were finally transferred to Barget Monuli. Barget Monuli had maybe they are members of the Hidden Devil's Eye. Chen Changming also squinted his eyes. Now there are two choices. Xiaoping'an pointed to the entrance to the Paris catacombs not far away. The person who just cast a spell to cause the corpse transformation here is hiding in the catacombs. He may want to destroy this place. Evidence, or he may want to create greater chaos. That person may still be in the underground tomb, or he may have escaped. Should we go in and search, or go to the underground tunnel of Chateau Boulogne to check the condition of the corpses first? Decide on the next steps. Xiaoping'an is only a foreign aide to the Order Committee. He only has the right to participate in actions and has no decision-making and command rights. So what to do next depends on the outcome of the discussion between the Order Committee and the Dragon team. Enter the catacombs of Paris, where more than 6 million corpses are buried, to search for a demon eye summoner who has mastered the secret method of large-scale corpse transformation. It may even be a group of demon eye summoners. This decision has a profound impact on everyone. It is a difficult challenge for everyone, and the degree of danger is self-evident. The degree of danger of entering the Paris catacombs is not on the same level of difficulty as searching underground tunnels and shelters before. Fang Lingqian and Chen Changming looked at each other, and Fang Lingqian said directly, "The situation here is very important. I will contact Minister Yan first to inform him and see what instructions Minister Yan has." Chen Changming nodded, "Agree." As he spoke, Fang Lingqian quickly ran towards the military subs and used the vehicle's communication equipment to report to Minister Yan what was happening here. "I'm thinking, if it's really the eye of the devil who moved the nuclear materials to the catacombs in Paris and didn't rush to transport them away, then what do they want to do?" Su Xiao from the Dragon Group said suddenly. "Maybe the devil's eye has a secret laboratory in the catacombs," Qiao Tong said. "The high-energy radiation of nuclear materials can transform space-invading organisms into demon spirits. As a special casting material, does the devil's eye want to do something in the catacombs of Paris?" Li Yunzhou frowned and looked at the distance. "The entrance to the catacombs, Grandma, the more I think about it, the more I think the mission in Paris is very dangerous. We are not really going to go into the catacombs with 6 million bones to find people." Xia Ping'an squinted at the entrance of the underground tomb not far away. The God of Fortune boy had just entered and walked around. The structure of the underground tomb here was more complicated, like a maze made of bones. The boy of Fortune God wandered around inside for a long time. "We only searched a small part of the tomb tunnels and found nothing." Xia Ping'an withdrew the God of Fortune boy. Fang Lingqian quickly walked over from the car. "Minister Yan already knew the situation here. He asked us not to rush into the catacombs first, but to go to Boulogne Castle first to determine the location of Boulogne Castle. The current situation and the radiation conditions of the corpses in the underground secret passage will determine the next action." Hearing Fang Lingqian's answer, several people present secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Everyone's actions could be described as swift and swift. After receiving the order, everyone drove directly towards Fort Boulogne. As for the mess left here in the cemetery, leave it to the Popular Front. When everyone left, several patrol teams and armored vehicles from the People's Front had been ordered to rush here. Suddenly, 700 or 800 armed personnel came in a huge crowd, ready to support Xia Ping'an, but they arrived a little late. Minutes, by the time they arrived, the battle here was over, and they could only stay to clean up the battlefield. 2 hours later, as a group of sleepyheads summoned by Xia Ping'an flew into the fort of Boulogne and the surrounding forests, the armed men guarding the fort of Boulogne fell to the ground one by one in the blink of an eye and fell into a deep sleep. In sleep, thunder cannot wake me up. In front of the real summoner, a group of tough armed men with weapons are as fragile as babies still in their infancy. A group of summoners drove directly into the Chateau Boulogne without any effort. Xia Ping'an led everyone to find the entrance to the underground secret passage of the Chateau Boulogne, leaving 3 women standing guard outside. A group of men summoned. He took out the slave firefly bag, took the radiation detector, and entered the underground tomb that had been eerie for hundreds of years. Everyone moved forward in the tomb passage filled with corpses. Li Yunzhou was not a timid guy, but in this scene, seeing the endless corpses all around him, his face gradually turned pale. Less than 2 kilometers into the underground tomb, in a stone chamber surrounded by skulls, the readings of the radiation detector held by the slave soldier began to increase suddenly, and an alarm sounded. Voice. This stone chamber should have stored nuclear materials before, so the radiation index here is so high. Everyone looked at each other and moved on. It didn't take long to find the corpses that Xia Ping'an mentioned were suspected of being silenced. The radiation detector readings spike again. The final destination of the nuclear materials ship to Paris has finally come to light. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 555. Order Committee Stronghold, Conference Room. The atmosphere in the conference room was a bit solemn. Everyone was here, including Xiaopinggan. Minister Yan stood on a huge electronic display screen in front of the conference room. He was holding a remote control in his hand and interpreting some old photos that appeared on the electronic display screen. It is a city of death, with corpses strewn all over the streets, like a land of death. Some of the photos on the electronic display were of a huge altar built of bones underground, surrounded by skeletons and blood splattered around the altar. This is a photo of Mumbai, the capital of the Republic of Gundaru in East Africa in 1974. The Mumbai incident directly wiped out half of the population of the Republic of Gundaru. In just a few days, a country more than 2.1 million people died. In the end, the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution and various countries sent peacekeeping troops and summoners, which finally calmed down the Mumbai incident. However, subsequently, the Gundaru Republic also disintegrated and became Sarabila today. And Azina. The photo below is the altar built by the Devil's Eye in the National Underground Cemetery in the capital of the Republic of Gundaru at that time. Because according to the Sarabila tribe's custom, they would collect the bones of their ancestors who died in the past generations to worship together, so there are more than 1 million corpses gathered in the underground cemetery of the capital. At that time, a red priest of the Devil's Eye dominated the Mumbai incident and used the bones in the underground cemetery to cast evil spells. The blood sacrifice summoned the bones. Monarch, nuclear raw materials can be used to create transformed demon spirits. Among the evil spells used by the Devil's Eye to summon the demon monarch, they are special casting materials. According to the data analysis we have received from the Intelligence Department of the Information and Order Committee, there is more than an 80% chance that the ultimate purpose of the batch of nuclear materials smuggled into Paris by the Devil's Eye is to be stored in the catacombs of Paris. The altar to summon the bone monarch was created. Just half an hour ago, the Intelligence Department of the Great Yan Kingdom had officially reported the situation to the French government. The subsequent crisis will be handled by the French government. Members of the Order Committee and the Dragon Group will not enter Paris. The catacombs. Minister Yan's voice was unusually calm, as if he was talking about something insignificant. What if the Intelligence Department's analysis is wrong? Fang Lingqian asked with a slight frown. Minister Yan pressed the remote control again on the electronic display in the room. In just a moment, another satellite surveillance picture appeared on the electronic display in the room. The picture showed a strange dark red color, and in the dark in the red picture, everything in Paris is glowing and looks a little hazy, as if it was shot under some kind of special effects lens. China's Weasel-5 and Weasel-6 radiation detection satellites have entered the predetermined orbit and are locked on Paris. If the nuclear materials that entered the Paris catacombs are transported out of the catacombs, our radiation detection satellites can be the first to time warning. We will intercept again when the time comes. What if the nuclear materials didn't come out? Tupolu asked with a frown. Tupolu's question caused the conference room to fall into an unusual silence. Everyone had already guessed the answer. This choice is difficult and not entirely morally flawless, but from a national standpoint, it can only be so. Minister Yan glanced at Tupolu and said calmly, I have communicated with various factions in Paris in the past few days. Negotiations on the evacuation channel at the airport have been completed. Our plane will arrive in Paris tomorrow and arrangements will be made for the evacuation of the overseas Chinese. If you have to stay, you will be responsible for your life and death. This is a problem for the French. What happens next may also affect the security of the European continent, but this has nothing to do with us. The Order Committee and the Dragon Group have no obligation to bleed and sacrifice their lives for others here. We previously cleaned up the demonic rat zombies in the underground tunnels here, discovered those biochemical poisons, and pacified the zombies in the 14th District Cemetery. We have made a huge contribution to the security of the city and Europe. If the Evil Eye's plan succeeds, the French government and the European Parliament are responsible for what happened here. By informing them of the situation, we have done our best in good faith. Do you understand? Tupolu's mouth moved, but in the end he nodded resolutely, his face becoming firm again. I understand, I obey the orders of my superiors. Well, Minister Yan also nodded, our current task is to monitor. As long as the nuclear materials do not appear outside the underground tomb, it has nothing to do with us. If the situation is irreversible, evacuate. I have already prepared we have arranged 3 evacuation plans. We will choose according to the situation at that time. We will ensure that everyone can evacuate safely in the most dangerous situation. Before the new mission comes, in principle, everyone will not leave District 11 these days and are not allowed to do so without authorization. Go out for action. If there is no problem, then let's break up the meeting. Everyone looked at each other, stood up from their seats one by one, and walked out of the door. Xiaopingyan had nothing to say and followed everyone out. Mr. Luowan, please stay, Minister Yan stopped Xiaopingyan. Xiaopingyan stopped and turned around. Minister Yan, is there anything else? A smile suddenly appeared on Minister Yan's serious face, but it was fleeting. This time we were able to find the key clues about the nuclear materials, thanks to the information provided by Mr. Luowan. Thank you very much. There are no tasks these days. Mr. Luowan can take a rest, and when the time is up, we will continue to pay Mr. Luowan the reward for the second world bead. Okay, thanks. Paris is very unsafe now. If Mr. Luowan doesn't dislike it, he can move to our place. I have already asked someone to prepare a room for Mr. Luowan. No need, my residence in Paris is very safe and it's very convenient to come here. If anything happens, we can contact you at any time. After chatting with Minister Yan for a few words, Xiaopingyan left the conference room. After saying hello to Tupolu and others outside, he left the Order Committee's stronghold. The few world beads he just obtained haven't been fused yet. Moreover, according to what Minister Yan just said, the Crisis Order Committee and the Dragon Group will not interfere anymore, but if he wants to intervene, it will be regarded as a private action, and the Order Committee will not be able to control him. There is still a lot of room for operation. As long as you operate it well, getting a few more boundary beads will not be a problem. When he walked out of the Order Committee's stronghold, it was already dark outside. Xiaopingyan touched his chin and said to himself that it now depends on how many world beads the gangs in Paris and the French government can use to save Paris. It seems that I have to meet Mr. Curie again. Updated a chapter today. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 556. In the private room of Chez Terroir restaurant, Xiaopingyan was enjoying black truffles and drinking Romani Conti while talking with Mr. Curie. At this time, Mr. Curie's face was already extremely solemn, and his voice was trembling. As the head of the Popular Front, Mr. Curie obviously did not need anyone's explanation to know exactly what happened in the Republic of Gundera, an East African country. He was very aware of the seriousness of the matter. Mr. Luowan, are you saying that Paris may repeat the Manbanet incident that year, and that the Devil's Eye may use those nuclear materials and the bones in the Paris catacombs to summon the Demon Lord with evil methods? Unfortunately, I'm afraid that's the case. Xiaopingyan put down the knife and fork in his hand and took a sip of wine. The news I got here is that the Great Yan Kingdom has notified the French government of the situation in Paris and gathered on the National Day. Those summoners from the Great Yan Kingdom in the area will not enter the catacombs of Paris, because there are summoners of the Devil's Eyes in the catacombs. You have also seen the ability of the summoner of the Devil's Eyes. The tomb is like his in the back garden, he can turn all the skeletons into his warriors. It is too dangerous for summoners to enter the catacombs. Summoners from other countries will not take such risks for France and Paris. If the Popular Front has no other way, remind the people evacuation may prevent greater casualties in the future. Xiaopinghan was taking retreat as a way to advance, speaking these words to Mr. Curie with the attitude and tone of a bystander. Is there no other way? Mr. Curie asked. We have to ask the French government and the European Parliament about this. It depends on how much sacrifice and effort they are prepared to make to save Paris. The relationship between Paris and the government is relatively stiff now. Before the government completely restores its leadership over Paris, I'm afraid it won't invest too much for us. The government will take the opportunity to negotiate with us and make us surrender, waiting for those bureaucrats to fully react. Paris may be in ruins, and those politicians and quarrelsome members of the European Parliament will only throw the problem to the French government and put pressure on the French government. If the French government does not handle it properly, they will jump out and stand to condemn from the moral high ground. I know very well what those people will do. Mr. Curie said with a frown. I'm sorry. After all, this is something that can lead to death. I have no reason to ask those people I know to rush into the catacombs and become heroes. Mr. Curie held his cane and walked around the room anxiously, frowning, suddenly turned his head, his eyes suddenly returned to determination. Mr. Le Guin, can you help us? I know Mr. Le Guin is very powerful, like today's corpse transformation in the cemetery. If Mr. Le Guin were not at the scene, the consequences may not be imaginable. Of course, we will not let Mr. Le Guin take such a big risk for no reason. I mean, if can we offer appropriate and attractive compensation, and can Mr. Le Guin help us eliminate this crisis? I know some powerful and mysterious summoners. Xiaopinghan smiled slightly, and finally caught it all. Although the spirit of internationalism is touching, Xiaopinghan is not ready to become a selfless internationalist warrior at this moment. To a certain extent, only the stronger you are, the more hope there will be for human beings in this world. Therefore, this is not about ignoring death, but about taking advantage of the situation. My greed is for all mankind, Xiaopinghan said to himself in his heart. Then he said, as long as you can provide enough remuneration, I am willing to go in and try with them. I can't guarantee the result. I can only guarantee that we will be worthy of your remuneration. Those are Xiaopinghan's virtual characters, will make people misunderstand that he has many partners and friends, and will not make people doubt his strength. After he actually enters the underground tomb, who knows what is going on inside? He only needs to search in the catacombs, just kill the summoner of the Devil's Eye and prevent the Evil Eye's people from succeeding. Mr. Curie suddenly regained his energy and took a deep breath. It's a fair proposal. What remuneration does Mr. Le Guin need? World beads, all kinds of world beads, the best and rare ones. Based on the world beads you can provide, I can organize some people to provide you with corresponding help. This will take some time. The Popular Front does not have many boundaries. I want to discuss it with the heads of other organizations in Paris. After seeing the corpses in the cemetery today, I think those people already know the seriousness of the matter. Sex. It's the best. Xiaopinghan gently wiped the corners of his mouth with a napkin and stood up. If you decide, hang a string of yellow balloons on the tower, and I will come here to find you. It's best to be quick. Not at all, because I don't know how long those Devil Eyes people will be setting up in the tomb. Understood. With the courtesy of Mr. Curie and Gabrielle, the two sent Xiaopinghan directly to the door of the restaurant, and then watched helplessly as Xiaopinghan's figure took a few steps in front of them, as if it was disappearing into the darkness. Like bubbles, they gradually disappear. A sense of awe filled both of them. Sir. Gabrielle looked at Mr. Curie, with a slightly bitter smile and a trace of doubt on her face. We don't seem to have any boundary beads. The previous few boundary beads we had people try to fuse have all been consumed. It's over, and it failed several times, and 2 people died. No, Guy, we must have it, no matter what, we must have it. Mr. Curie looked at the sky, took a deep breath of the chilly night air, and his eyes suddenly became colder than the night sky. Those gentlemen, you must sit down and talk to me, and our government. The government also has an obligation to do something for the people of Paris in exchange for our understanding of their previous betrayal. If they can't do it, then we will join them. Go to hell. When Xiaopinghan returned to Emily's villa, the villa was empty. Only Emily's dog Batu was guarding the home. Since Emily joined the patrol, she felt that she was getting more and more busy. When Batu saw Xiaopinghan coming back, he ran over, wagging his tail. Xiaopinghan took out the sausage from the space equipment and fed it to Batu. After touching Batu's head, he came to the underground shelter. After habitually opening the formation disk, Xiaopinghan breathed a long sigh of relief and took out the 3 world beads he just got today. It had been a long day today, there were too many things going on, and he didn't have time to integrate them until so late. First, he took out the world bead from Wenji Qidan. After Xiaopinghan shed blood, he was quickly surrounded by a cocoon of light. Hearing the chicken and dancing is a magical world bead, which tells the story of Zoti. It is easy to fuse this world bead, as long as you can get up early and be diligent. In just a few minutes, the world bead was easily integrated. Xiaopinghan's upper limit of divine power had reached 8,203 points, and he was getting closer to the threshold of the Seven Suns realm. Then, Xiaopinghan began to fuse the world bead of the Zhao family orphans. This world bead is not difficult for people who are familiar with the history of the Zhao family orphans. There are many praiseworthy characters in it. Xiaopinghan just didn't know that he was going to be there. It's just a role played in it. In the world of the orphan of the Zhao family, as soon as Xiaopinghan opened his eyes, he saw an old man with a long beard and a resolute face kneeling in front of him, looking at him with extremely serious eyes, and asked directly, "My lord has an orphan, but Tuanghua wiped out my lord's entire family. If he doesn't find this orphan, he won't let go. He has searched the whole city for babies under 6 months old. My lord's flesh and blood, now you are the only one we can both rely on you, Chen Ying. Do you think it is more difficult to raise an orphan or die?" Looking at the old man in front of him and listening to what the old man said, Xiaopinghan knew that the old man who spoke was Gongsun Chuju, and his current identity was Chen Ying. "It's easy to die, but it's difficult to raise an orphan," Xiaopinghan replied. The old man smiled, with a calm face. "Mr. Zhao treats you well, just do the hard things, and I will leave the rest to you. I am old and no longer useful, so just do the simple things." Xiaopinghan looked at Gongsun Chuju's face and bowed deeply to Gongsun Chuju. Golden Summoner. Author, Zyu. Chapter 557. Wooer, you have been crowned today and have become an adult. You have inherited the ancestral business and restored the honor of the Zhao family. Tuanghua has been executed. What I promised Gongsun Chuju has been completed. I want to go to Gongsun Chuju to tell him this news about him. At this moment, Xiaopinghan was already gray-haired. He looked at Zhao Wu, who had grown up and had just completed the crowning ceremony, and said softly. At this moment, Zhao Wu had avenged his great revenge, fully understood his life experience, and with the support of Jin Jinggong, he destroyed the Tuanghua family. The orphans of the Zhao family have now grown up, but Chen Ying has already getting old. But Xiaopinghan knew that the story of the Zhao orphans was not over yet. The protagonist of the story of the Zhao orphans was never Zhao Wu, but Chen Ying and the long-dead Gongsun Chuju. Chen Ying used his life to interpret the four words loyalty, justice, and loyalty, explain the true meaning and spirit behind the story of the Zhao orphans. Hearing what Xia Pinggan said, 20-year-old Zhao Wu burst into tears. He knelt down directly in front of Xia Pinggan and touched his head to the ground. When he raised his face, tears burst into his face. Why do you want to leave me? Even if I am broken into pieces, I can't repay your kindness. Why don't you give me this chance? During the incident in the lower palace, all the Lord's disciples and guests were able to die for the Lord. It's not that I can't die. It's just that Gongsun Chuju and I agreed that we would raise you up and inherit the Lord's family business. Now 20 years have passed. I have completed what I promised Gongsun Chuju, and I just want to go underground to tell him and return my promise to him. If I don't tell him, he will think that I have not completed what I promised him. So I must go. If you, by blocking me and not allowing me to go to Gongsun Chuju to revive me, you are trapping me into disloyalty and unrighteousness, and leaving me shameless to face my lord and Gongsun Chuju after death. Okay, go out. I will stay alone for a while, and I will send someone to you tomorrow morning. Come in and remember to bury me next to Gongsun Chuju. Xia Pinggan said, turned around, turned his back to Zhao Wu, looked at the tall and vigorous pine tree in the yard outside, and stopped talking. Zhao Wu cried loudly and knelt behind Xia Pinggan for half a day. Finally, when he saw that Xia Pinggan had not turned around, he kowtowed heavily to Xia Pinggan, shed tears, and slowly left the room. After Zhao Wu completely left, Xia Pinggan turned around and walked towards a desk in the room. He took off the sword on the desk, pulled out the gleaming sword with a choking sound, and sighed softly, alas, is it over? Chen Ying, it's hard for you. The world of the boundary pearl was shattered, and the upper limit of the secret mandala's divine power was reduced to 8,263 points. Chen Ying and Gongsun Chuju sat opposite each other on the magic position of a bronze sculpture, each bowing to the other. This is the magic position of the substitute technique. The substitution technique cannot be performed continuously and infinitely. Instead, as the full moon and the secret mandala consume divine power, it automatically recovers every month. There is an opportunity to perform the substitution technique once a month. The substitute technique is a passive skill. Every time it is activated, using the substitute technique to protect yourself consumes 99 points of divine power. Once there is an attack or spell that can destroy your life, the substitute technique will be activated at the most critical moment, allowing you to, in that moment, you avoid death, replace your body with a substitute, and teleport you out of danger. The specific distance you can teleport depends on your cultivation level. To a certain extent, this secret method is equivalent to giving people an extra life. Substitution is ineffective against poison and only reacts to attacks. Xia Pinggan in the secret room opened his eyes and let out a long breath. Even though he had come out of the world of Jizu, this story still made him angry and couldn't calm down for a long time. The wise and courageous Gongsun Chuju and Chen Ying left such a secret method for all future summoners. In the end, there was only the Earth Escape boundary bead. Seeing the little man coming alive in the world pearl and constantly escaping underground, Xia Pinggan calmed down and started to fuse again. This world bead is so weird. It is a world bead that he has no clue about how to fuse since he fused it. Just try your luck. Xia Pinggan was surrounded by an earthy yellow light cocoon for the third time. When Xia Pinggan opened his eyes, he found himself on a beautiful island, surrounded by waves, blue sky and white clouds above his head, and the island was full of birds and flowers. It was like a paradise. Where is this place? Xia Pinggan is a little confused. Who are you now? Xia Pinggan didn't know either. He looked at the clothes he was wearing. They were simple linen clothes that looked very old. Besides his clothes, he had nothing on him to prove his identity. Seeing a creek nearby, Xia Pinggan quickly ran towards the creek. The stream is gurgling and crystal clear. Colorful pebbles are everywhere in the stream, and some small fish are swimming happily in the stream. Xiaopinggan squatted on the edge of the stream and surrounded a calm water surface with pebbles in the stream. Then he lowered his head and looked at his own face in the reflection of the water. The face that appeared in the reflection of the stream was not someone else's face, but Xiaopinggan's. His own face. Xiaopinggan was stunned. What was going on? This is the first time he has seen this situation. In the past, he always became someone else in the world pearl. Why did he become himself in this mythical world pearl? Just when Xiaopinggan looked down at the stream, the sky was reflected in the stream, and a purple rainbow flew across the sky, which Xiaopinggan happened to see in the stream. Xiaopinggan stood up at once, looked at the direction in which the rainbow disappeared, and found that it was the mountain peak in the middle of the island. He thought about it, and immediately rushed towards the mountain in the middle of the island. There were no dangerous creatures on the island at all. A few hours later, Xiaopinggan took a wooden spear made from a branch and finally climbed to the top of the mountain where the purple rainbow disappeared. When Xiaopinggan climbed up the mountain, he was stunned. He saw a fat Taoist priest, full of immortal energy, sitting in front of a cave in the middle of the mountain, using the mountain behind him as a screen, breathing clouds and mist. It seems to be absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, quite leisurely. Above the entrance of the cave, there are 3 simple small seal characters with the words Fi Yun Cave written on them. When the Taoist saw Xiaopinggan climbing up the mountain, he suddenly opened his eyes flashed, and he smiled slightly. Another person comes to me to learn earth escape. It doesn't matter. According to my rules, as long as you can tell me with your name, I will teach you the earth escape technique. Anyone who wants to fuse this kind of world bead would be confused. Xiaopinggan was confused for a moment, and he turned his gaze to the cave behind the Taoist. The 3 words Fi Yun Cave were like a flash of lightning, lighting up a story and character in Xiaopinggan's memory. Fi Yun Cave? Jialong Mountain Fi Yun Cave? This is the dojo of Fear Lu Sun, one of the 12 immortals of Yugzu who taught in the mythology. Wait, in the mythology, Wei Liasun is Tu Xingsun's master, and Tu Xingsun's earth escape technique was taught to him by Wei Liasun. Xiaopinggan looked at the Taoist's waist, and sure enough he saw a purple gold rope around the Taoist's waist, a rope to bind the immortal. Junior Xiaopinggan pays homage to the supreme immortal Liu Sun. Xiaopinggan bowed to the Taoist. Ha ha ha, since you can say my name, you are destined to be with me. Anyway, I will teach you the earth escape technique. Yin Liasun laughed loudly, and with a casual finger, a little golden light penetrated into Xiaopinggan's body. In the forehead, you have learned the earth escape technique. Just go down the mountain and leave. Don't disturb my practice again. As Jen Liusun said, he waved his hand to Xiaopinggan, then continued to talk about Yongxia and ignored it. Xiaopinggan was stunned for a moment because he learned it so easily. He guessed that when he got off the mountain, the world of this world bead would be shattered. This mythical world bead can be the most difficult to fuse, or it can be the easiest to fuse. It all depends on ability. But Xiaopinggan is not in a hurry. As long as the Jizu is not completely crushed and withdraws, this means that he still has the possibility to make progress. In addition to the earth escape technique, I heard that the supreme immortal Fear Lu Sun has the secret method of turning the ground into steel, which can restrain the earth escape technique. I wonder if the immortal can teach me the technique of turning the ground into steel. Xiaopinggan continued to salute and asked. Fearful Sun suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Xiaopinggan again, with a hint of surprise in his eyes. You should actually know that I can teach the art of turning earth into steel. Who told you? The 12 immortals of Yugzu Palace are very famous. Naturally, I know that I am afraid of leaving Grand Immortal. In addition to the art of turning the ground into steel, I also know that the immortal has a secret treasure to bind the immortal rope, which is also unique. Ha ha ha, you are quite clever. It seems that you have a close relationship with me. However, I can't break the rules I have set. I can only teach you the earth escape technique this time when you come here. If you can see me again next time, if you can pass the test I give you, I will teach you the method of turning the ground into steel that can restrain the earth escape technique. Then how can this junior see the immortal again? Xiaopinggan quickly asked. How you saw it this time, it will be the same next time, Fearful Sun said, and with a wave of his hand, the world of Jizu was shattered. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 558. In the secret room, Xiaopinggan opened his eyes, with a hint of doubt in his eyes. The secret method of earth escape has been mastered, and the secret mandala's divine power has increased by 49 points, now reaching 8,312 points, but Xiaopinggan is still confused. He didn't know how this mythical world bead was fused before, but now that he knows it, he has questions. The previous world beads were all real people and illusions in history. Why are the mythical world beads this time a character in mythology? Are those myths also real, just told as stories? Even if those myths are true, then in Chinese history, this world bead has been fused 3 times before. How did the person who fused this world bead pass the test in the world bead? How did you know the name of Sun Shangxian? Just by telling a random name, you can guess the name of the immortal, Wei Liasun? The possibility is almost zero. Xiaopinggan sat in the secret room and thought for a while, and found that it was impossible to get any answers by guessing. Then he shook his head, smiled bitterly, put away the formation disc, and walked out of the secret room. From the time he entered the secret room to the time he came out, with 3 world beads fused in between, less than 3 hours had passed. The goal of 8,820 points in the 7 Sun realm is getting closer and closer, and Xiaopinggan's heart is burning when he walks out of the secret room. Woof woof woof. Xiaopinggan had just walked out of the secret room to the living room when he heard the excited barking of Batu, the shepherd dog in the yard outside, and the sound of the door lock being opened. No need to ask, Emily is back. Batu, don't make trouble. I'm tired and it's late. Go back to your home and go to sleep. Emily's voice came from the yard outside the villa. Her voice was weak, and even her steps were unusually heavy. Xiaopinggan could already picture Emily's appearance in his mind without looking at her. He shook his head and smiled, then went straight to the kitchen and started making soup and frying steaks. Although Emily is his disciple, Xiaopinggan actually thinks of Xiaoning every time he sees Emily, and can't help but treat Emily like a little girl. Her lips were a little dry, and a few strands of sweaty hair stuck weakly to her forehead. Her steps in stab-proof boots were heavy and slow. Emily, who was wearing a black patrol uniform and tactical vest, was indeed dragging her feet tiredly. Pushing the door open, she returned to the villa. As soon as she entered the hall of the villa, Emily came to the sofa in the villa like a koala toy with its body hollowed out. She took off her belt and put the pistol and the dagger-slinging belt were thrown on the table next to him, and he collapsed on the sofa as if exhausted, staring at the dark ceiling with his eyes blankly, like a dried salted fish. So tired. Today is the most tiring day since joining the patrol. Emily felt like an empty conch shell washed up on the beach. She just wanted to lie on the beach, let the waves blow, let the sand bury her, and didn't even want to move her eyes. After lying on the sofa for almost 5 or 6 minutes, Emily's eyes moved. She blinked and her nose moved. She had already smelled the alluring aroma, which made her stomach growl. Cried. At this moment, Emily suddenly remembered something. She quickly got up from the sofa and walked quickly towards the kitchen of the villa. The closer she got to the kitchen, the stronger the fragrance became. Teacher. Seeing Xiaopinggan actually busy in the kitchen, Emily was startled and stammered, "Leave this to me, I can make it soon." "No, I'm almost done." "Why, are you tired today?" Xiaopinggan asked while frying the steak. "The city is so chaotic today that I feel like it." I heard that there is a big problem at the cemetery in the 14th district. The main armed forces of the People's Front have been transferred there. I did the work of 5 people by myself today. Didn't even drink a sip of water. Oh, really? Xiaoping'an was cooking things carelessly, while thinking in his head that he should get 2 world beads that summon the god of cookery and the strongest cook. If there were any, he would not have to go to the kitchen in the future. There are people everywhere in Paris saying that dead bodies crawled out of graves to eat people today. There is some chaos outside. Many rogues took the opportunity to rob and steal things. It's terrible. On my way back, I also caught 3 robbers. The bastard in the store sent them to the patrol prison again, which wasted time. As Emily spoke, she swallowed her saliva and watched Xiaoping'an fry the steak in the pan until both sides were brown, then luxuriously pour expensive red wine on the steak, and then put the fried steak and vegetables on the plate. Topped with black pepper juice and basil leaves, the authentic French red wine steak smell made Emily almost swallow her tongue. Dinner is already ready, take out the soup and bread. Xiaoping'an had already prepared the steak, took another look at the cooked soup, and said to Emily. Emily blinked and said pitifully to Xiaoping'an, "Teacher, only 1 steak. This is made for you and I've already eaten it." "Thank you, teacher." Emily suddenly laughed. "I have to go out. I don't know when I will come back. I might come back at dawn, or it might take a few days. Don't worry. If you encounter something you really can't solve, make sure you are alive first. Everything will wait for me. Let's talk about it when we come back." "Ah, teacher, are you going away?" Emily asked in surprise. "Isn't it right for men to make money? I'm poor too." "Teacher, are you still poor?" "It almost means the same thing." Xiaoping'an touched his nose and smiled. "Okay, I'm leaving." Emily wanted to say something else, but found that Xiaoping'an had disappeared directly in front of her. Yes, disappeared directly. Emily felt a sense of awe in her heart. She felt that her teacher seemed to be getting more and more powerful. The magic that disappeared out of thin air made people unable to feel the slightest trace of the spell. Xiaoping'an walked through the underground, just like a swordfish swimming in the water. The surrounding soil and rocks were like a thin layer of mist, which seemed so unreal, and through this thin layer of mist, he could still see the water supply pipelines and gas pipelines buried underground in Paris, as well as the tree roots extending into the soil layer, as well as the underground rivers and subway channels in the soil layer. The earth escape technique is too powerful and fast. Nothing has changed, only my body and perception have changed. How can people outside know that there are people in this layer of soil by using the earth escape technique? It's too hidden. The word earth in this earth escape technique actually refers not only to earth, but also to stones and stone-like materials. Stones can also pass through easily. Like soil, this secret technique can pass through mountains and into the ground. Xiaoping'an rushed towards the exit of the catacombs in the 14th arrondissement of Paris, which he had just left during the day. First, get rid of the rats in the devil's eye in the catacombs, and then slowly negotiate favorable terms with the French to help them relieve the crisis. Cough, cough. Anyway, if I don't say it, who knows? Paris. The rats in the catacombs have been dealt with. Today's update: Tiger is adjusting his condition. Everyone, take a rest early. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 559. Paris, the dark catacombs, the depths. The green will-o'-the-wisps danced in various spaces in the dark and claustrophobic underground. The heads of millions of skeletons covered the huge space on the ground, like a desert of bones. This scene was like hell. Looking around, a skeleton castle made entirely of human bones stood in the darkness. The shape of the skeleton castle was like the Iron Tower on the ground in Paris, with an unspeakable meaning. And around the castle of bones, there are mountains of bones. There are almost millions of skeletons piled up around the mountains of bones. At this moment, the bones in the mountains of bones are squirming. Now, skeletons are coming out of the bone mountain one after another, turning into an army of skeletons outside the skeleton castle. At this moment, the skeleton army numbered tens of thousands, just like an army, vast and powerful, exuding a cold and terrifying evil aura. Each skeleton in the bone mountain is like a product produced on an assembly line, being automatically assembled. Bones such as skull, sternum, ribs, spine, humerus, ulna, leg bones, etc., have been piled up here. Skeletons that have been lying there for hundreds of years are crawling out of the ground, moving from the hills of bones, being driven by a mysterious and powerful force to regroup and stand up. Wearing a red robe, with sunken eye sockets and a sharp aquiline nose, Baurget Monuli was standing on the highest balcony of the skeleton castle, looking with cold eyes at the distance that was gradually turning into a living creature. Of Bone Mountain. A group of summoners in black and grey robes, about a dozen or so, were standing behind him, looking at everything in front of them with enthusiasm, excitement, and admiration and awe. Behind everyone, on a platform high in the castle, a huge bone altar has been completed. On the altar, countless bones are wrapped in balls of black air, floating in the air. In the middle of the altar, there is a devil's eye. The sacrificial totem, the eyeball in the middle of the totem, is surrounded by blood and lead blocks like the wall, and there is also a barrel-shaped metal container with the nuclear raw material PU logo surrounded by rotten flesh and black air. The altar is in operation. The metal container containing weapons-grade plutonium raw materials is surrounded by black smoke. A little green light is spreading from around the metal container and is absorbed by the bones floating on the white bone altar. Those who have absorbed those green after the light, the shape, color, and appearance of the floating skeletons also changed little by little. Several pale skulls showed a tendency to merge with each other, revealing the appearance of a larger skull, with red eyes flashing. Damn it, if the Order Committee and the Dragon Group hadn't been pursuing it too closely, our process of summoning the Bone Lord would have been smoother. We shouldn't have been discovered by anyone yet. Everything could have gone according to plan. Now they have discovered us. And our altar only summoned the marquee level, and today I have completed the mission during the day. Later, I set up an ambush circle, and no summoner in the city dared to enter the catacombs. A man in black robes with a pale face, a man who looked like a geisha and a vampire, was standing behind Baurget Monuli, speaking in a cold voice. Andrew, you don't seem to have completed your mission very well today. Another wrinkled man wearing a black robe next to him said, I just received the news that there is no large-scale massacre in Paris right now. Chaos. There are no zombies on the streets of Paris. The chaos in the 14th arrondissement is very limited. Only the cemetery area is blocked. The old guy from the Popular Front is not dead. On the contrary, he is more active. He has organized with other gangs in Paris. I contacted the person in charge and wanted to raise the world beads, but what about the chaos and the zombie tide you mentioned? There is nothing. Frere, are you doubting me? The man with the snow-white face flashed a fierce light in his eyes, looking at the man with wrinkles who spoke fiercely. Everyone around, even the blind, knew that the two black priests did not deal with each other, but this situation was very common in the eyes of the devil. There was competition between the black priests and the red priests. Not a harmonious group. Frere sneered and looked at Andrew without any fear. Shouldn't you? I suspect that in order to preserve your strength at the critical moment, you did not complete the large-scale corpse sacrifice as requested by Lord Monuri to create enough chaos for Nori. Lord Nuri, please buy some time. During the period when the glory of the Lord Demon God has faded, your performance is not worthy of the black clothes you are wearing. Otherwise, how could the second-level summoner in the military escape from you last time? The vampire-like man gritted his teeth. "Frere, I will definitely mount your skull on my cane one day. Really, I think your skull is more suitable for my cane." The two priests in black looked at each other with fire in their eyes. "That's enough," Baurget Monoli said coldly, then turned his head and glanced at the faces of the two people with cold eyes. "Andrew, what's going on with today's corpse sacrifice? Why isn't there achieve the desired results?" "Your Excellency, that's because the summoner named Lugoan was with the old man, and not long after I started, the Order Committee and the Dragon team arrived, so the chaos was limited to the cemetery in District 14. Haha, can the Order Committee and the Dragon group arrive so quickly? They will arrive as soon as your corpse sacrifice breaks out." "Why don't I believe it?" Frere sneered beside him and said, "Maybe your corpse sacrifice can Lugoan alone can deal with the summoned rotting corpses." Looking at the slightly suspicious gaze of Baurget Monoli, the vampire-like man glared at Frere, and then quickly explained, "Your Excellency, I don't know why the people of the Order Committee and the Dragon Group can be so fast. Arrived, maybe they had made an agreement before. You can ask someone to check and verify the situation of the cemetery in the 14th district at any time. I am willing to bear the consequences, but Lugoan's strength is a bit too strong. It is possible that you have reached the peak of the 7th level, just like you. Is it that Lugoan who ruined our good deeds again?" Baurget Monoli squinted his eyes, with murderous intent flashing in his eyes. "The Doomsday Gang was also destroyed by his hands last time. Such a summoner in Paris after hiding it for such a long time, we only discovered it now. It is really inappropriate. We cannot let such a person live, but at present, we can only let him live for 2 more days." As he spoke, Baurget Monoli moved his hands and threw a black bottle to Andrew and Frere each. "I don't care what you do, what I need is a Paris that is chaotic enough to summon the Bone Monarch for us win the last time. You two will act together tomorrow. Andrew, you will be responsible for the east side of Paris, and Frere, you will be responsible for the west side. Let me see what you are capable of. I still need 10 days. You two are the most promising of my men. Candidates for advancement to the Red Priest, whoever of you can complete this task better, I will consider recommending in advance who will have priority to get the trial of the Red Priest." The two men in black glanced at each other, their eyes flashing with gleaming eyes, and they each nodded. "Yes, Your Excellency." At this moment, an abrupt and lazy voice suddenly appeared in everyone's ears. "Will it take another 10 days to complete? It's a bit slow. I can't wait for you for 10 days. As soon as this voice appeared, everyone in the skeleton castle was shocked. "Who?" Baurget Monoli roared, and with a move of his hand, a beam of blood hit the bone wall behind everyone. Boom! The bone wall suddenly shattered and exploded into countless broken bones, flying everywhere. Black mist rolled over the other demon eyes, and some even released a large swath of phantom monster spirits. Among the splashing bones, Xiaopingan's figure slowly walked out of the darkness. With a smile on his face, Xiaopingan shook his head gently and looked at Baurget Manu with a look of disgust. There were a group of people whose expressions changed greatly. "You rats' aesthetics are too unbearable. You actually like to live in such a place. What a bunch of rats." Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 560. Golden Summoner. With black hair and black eyes, Xiaopingan walked out of the darkness with bare hands and a black trench coat. He had a disdainful smile on his lips and cold eyes, like a king, looking down at the people in front of him. Xiaopingan's calmness were in sharp contrast to the group of snarling people and flying demon spirits he faced at the Devil's Eye in the skeleton castle. Just the next second after Xiaopingan appeared, several flying phantom monsters, 5 demon spiders, 2 brain-eating worms, 17 or 18 strange green flames, and more than 50 ice picks, more than 20 black smoke-like arrows, a group of slave soldiers, wild wolves, strange snakes burning with flames, and a group of screaming light green ghosts and hundreds of walking skeleton warriors in the castle. It rushed towards Xiaoping'an, blocking all the roads in front of and behind Xiaoping'an, as if it was going to annihilate Xiaoping'an. Except for Baorget Monuli, who had just taken the lead, the mages of the Devil's Eye only waited for a moment before taking action against Xiaoping'an all at once. Xiaoping'an didn't move as if he hadn't seen those attacks. But in front of and behind him, when all the attacks were about to come, streaks of bright light appeared in the void, and the streaks of bright light intertwined into a picture. The net completely protected Xiaoping'an. That bright light was the light from the dagger in the hand of the 7th level Chen-Xing assassin summoned by Xiaoping'an, cutting through the void. At this moment, the powerful strength of the 7th level Chen-Xing assassin summoned by Xiaoping'an was truly revealed. The 7th level Chen-Xing assassin flew out of Xiaoping'an's shadow, and with just one move, a flashing sword net flew around Xiaoping'an. All the demon spirits that rushed over, all the creatures summoned, as well as the skeletal warriors and attacks on Xiaoping'an, as soon as they came within 2 meters of Xiaoping'an, they were directly transformed into countless fragments in the flashing light. All dissipated. The overwhelming attack was like brilliant fireworks, fleeting. All this was completed in less than 1/10 of a second. The figure of the Chen-Xing assassin flashed beside Xiaoping'an. In the next 1/10 of a second, the figure of the Chen-Xing assassin had already rushed into the summoners of the Devil's Eyes who were attacking Xiaoping'an. A bright sword light flashed in the air, like a big net, covering all those people except Baorget Monuli. Andrew, whose face was as white as a geisha or a vampire, was about to fly away when he saw his body remaining on the ground and his head flying up. Not only that, his body left on the ground suddenly turned into countless pieces of crushed ice. Freyr was next to him, about to release a poison barrier. Freyr's body was also frozen in time at the same time, and then turned into countless fragments in the flash of light. The same was true for other people, their vitality and life disappeared in an instant, their bodies were frozen, turned into pieces, and scattered on the ground. Andrew could only vaguely see a strange figure with a short sword in his hand flashing among them. What was that person summoning that made so many people on his side unable to resist a move? This was the last thought in Andrew's head. Andrew's head flew up and landed on the ground, like a broken crystal cup. It suddenly turned into countless fragments, like glass shards on the ground. The sinking star assassins killing and freezing were completed in an instant. A group of demon eye summoners instantly became scum. To deal with these little minions, Xiaoping'an was too lazy to take action. He summoned the Chen-Xing assassin and plowed the courtyard and cleared the holes with one move, making the castle instantly quiet. Looking at the frozen fragments on the ground, but no boundary beads exploded for a moment, Xiaoping'an curled his lips and muttered, "They are also a group of poor people who don't even have space equipment." Then, Xiaoping'an looked at Baorget Monuli with expectant eyes, and a kind smile appeared on his face. For a moment, Baorget Monuli felt that he was so close to death. He felt as if there were several sharp blades scratching against his neck and heart, but the blades were not close to his skin. When it was cold, it never came closer, and it was fleeting, like a cold wind from the polar regions. Ice shards and shards all over the floor were like the evidence left behind by a violent prehistoric beast that broke into the china shop. Among the members of the demon eye in the castle, he was the only one in the blink of an eye, and everything seemed like a dream. Baorget Monuli's face turned pale, his whole body was covered in cold sweat, and his soul was trembling. He looked at Xiaoping'an, who was walking over step by step, and the strange black figure that had just disappeared in the air. Nuri unknowingly stepped back step by step, bending slightly, looking extremely humble and insignificant, like a rabbit surrendering in front of the Lion King. His voice trembled, and he asked directly in Chinese, "Luoan, no. Luoan is not that strong, there are tens of thousands of skeletons outside the tomb guarded by tactics, who are you?" "Of course I am Luoan," I just didn't expect that the Red Priest with the Devil's Eye would actually become the city guardian of Paris. Well, it should be the 6 UN realm, not the 5 UN realm. Xiaoping glanced around the man in front of him, this eerie and cold castle of bones, and the huge altar with bones floating in the void, smacked his lips. It seems that you have been building this catacomb for a long time. This altar of yours is a bit, I mean, I'll give you 10 seconds to think about it and give me a reason not to kill you. Baurget Monoli suddenly turned around, turned into a streak of black smoke, and jumped from the high tower of the skeleton castle. He wanted to rush outside and escape, but he didn't even have the courage to take action, so he just wanted to run. A golden sword suddenly appeared in the void and flew towards him. The black smoke incarnated by Baurget Monori was slashed by a golden sword. He screamed in the air and a figure appeared in the black smoke. The thigh had already fallen from his body, and a piece of blood fell from the air. Before his thigh fell from the air to the ground, the thunder pattern of the array in the sky lit up, with a roar, and a bolt of lightning shot directly from the sky. The water poured down from the air and immediately electrified Baurget Monoli like coke. His whole body was smoking and he fell heavily to the ground. Then, the fire pattern flashed on the ground. The Red Priest with the Devil's Eye couldn't even make a sound. It turned into ashes, and the things in the space equipment exploded with a crash. Hey, a person of this age is still so naive, thinking that he can run away. Xiaoping shook his head. If I can come in, naturally I will use the formation disk to cover the skeleton castle of yours. Once you have a substitute or something, wouldn't I be sorry to the people of Paris if you ran away? The 7th level assassin Shen Xing appeared in front of Xiaoping in a flash, placing the things that exploded from Baurget Monoli's body in front of Xiaoping. From the beginning to the end, Xiaoping didn't take any action. As a person who was about to reach the 7 Yang realm, he faced such a group of rookies who were at the 6th Yang realm and not even the 2 Yang realm. It would be too embarrassing for him to take action personally. Looking at those things, Xiaoping also shook his head in disappointment. Hey, it seems that this rare world bead is really not easy to get. There are 3 world beads on Baurget Monori's body, all of which Xiaoping had fused before. In addition to the world beads, there is also a gold key that looks like a bank safe. Others are banknotes and money such as euros and Chinese yuan. There is also a box. The box is opened and there are some diamonds and rubies inside. There are other things like this, as well as some information, which are the equity certificate documents of a European shipping company and the ownership certificate of a trust fund. Xiaoping was a little disappointed. These wealth and other things were basically useless to him, but these things could not be wasted, so he put them away. Xiaoping turned around and came to the huge bone altar. As soon as Baurget Monoli died, the bone altar seemed to stop functioning all of a sudden. All the bones floating on the altar suddenly fell into the altar and turned into black powder. At the same time, the white bones turned into the powder, along with the army of skeletons outside the castle, all fell apart with a crash and turned into broken bones all over the ground. Once this ritual of summoning the Bone Lord is broken, everything will collapse instantly like a domino without a foundation. Xiaoping saw the nuclear materials in the middle of the altar, studied the altar again, and nodded secretly. The altar of Devil's Eye is a bit interesting. The basic structure of the altar has a bit of the spirit locking array, and the energy barrier constructed by the spirit locking array. The energy of nuclear radiation can be restrained and utilized within the altar. There are also some bloody words and patterns on the altar, which should be the secret method of the Devil's Eye. Things went smoothly. After taking away the Devil's Eye's lair in the Paris catacombs, Xiaoping used the formation lock to protect the skeleton castle and left Shen Xing to guard it here to see if he could catch 2 more Devil's Eye fish. Himself, escaped directly and left. The crisis in Paris has actually been resolved, but people outside don't know yet. This place is indeed not easy to find. The rest depends on your acting skills. While Xiaopinggan was flying underground, he was thinking in his heart that he had worked so hard to practice Earth escape, to save Paris. The passionate and romantic French people insisted on giving themselves a few world beads as a reward, and they collected them by themselves. Down, but not too much. Emily got up before dawn. Today's task was very heavy. Paris was very chaotic now. She had to report to the patrol an hour early. Then she was about to go to the kitchen to make breakfast for herself when she saw a figure in the living room. In a flash, Xiaopinggan was back. "Ah, teacher, are you back? Is everything done?" "Yeah, things are not complicated. I went out for a walk. Do you want to make breakfast? Remember to bring me a breakfast." Xiaopinggan touched his belly. Emily laughed.